Okay, so what I'm going to do today is talk about how to craft a resume that gets results. And obviously, results means more interviews and more referrals. One caveat that, I'll say right off the bat is that this is really more focused on people that get their job the more traditional way through networking. So, about 80% of jobs are achieved through networking. So this won't be focusing on people that are, applying to job boards and worrying about, ATS systems and everything, which, is probably better in a different presentation or a direct consultation with Lynn. So this is really meant for most of us that are more senior in our experience and background that will likely land their job through networking. As an overview, employers nowadays are looking for specialists, not so much generalists. And the reason is probably manyfold, but I think one of the main reasons is that job tenures have gotten very short. Nowadays, 2 years is sort of an average, maybe 3 years. Beyond that, you're sort of living on borrowed time. And a lot of reasons for that is just due to the volatility of the market out there with respect to mergers and acquisitions, disruptive technology coming in and changing an industry. For smaller, maybe family-owned businesses, a lot of folks are getting to the point of retirement and want to check out, and maybe they don't have children that they want to pass the business on to, so they have to sell the business. And also just technology has done so much to make work so much more productive that you need less people to cover broader responsibility. I'm sure there's other thoughts on that topic, and I'd appreciate any comments in that respect. So when people go out to hire, more senior level people nowadays, they've got very specific needs that they want accomplished. If you're an accounting or finance person, and the company is interested in either going public or possibly going from public to private, or they're getting ready to sell the business, or they're getting ready to buy a business, they're going to want some chief financial officer, for instance, or even a controller that has had those kinds of experiences so that they can hit the ground running and not sort of learn on the job. There's an awful lot of people out there with broad experiences that they can put into their organization. Also, in the accounting and finance realm, maybe you're upgrading your financial package, or maybe you're migrating to a different package, or some other challenge that would require somebody with those kinds of experience and skill sets. So think in terms of becoming or being a specialist and presenting yourself that way. And the last sort of preamble that I would say in that respect is, if you look at your resume or your career history, you can certainly find areas of specialty that you stand out in. There might be 2 or 3 areas that sort of repeat in your careers, and those are the areas that I would recommend that you turn into especially and build your resume around those specialist skill sets. So what are the things we're going to talk about today? What are you going to learn a little bit from me? The first point is that your resume is a marketing tool, and it conveys your brand message. I want to talk about formatting rules that make it easier for human beings to scan your resume, because most people reading a resume don't really read a resume. They scan it and maybe give it 10 to 15 seconds, maybe 20. And so in that 15 or 20 seconds, you've got to capture their imagination so they'll want to take a deeper dive and read your resume. So we're going to talk a little bit in terms of human scanning of resumes. We'll talk a little bit about what's the most important contact information for you to provide and what to leave off. One of the major themes of the talk today is about your positioning statement, which is right up front in your resume. Then skills that you want to present that will position you as a specialist. And then in the body of your resume, your career history, to talk about telling that in an interesting way that is almost like a story that really reinforces your whole, positioning strategy. So as we move along, we'll go into the audience participation part of the the discussion. Here's a draft of a resume that I've been working with a client on. Just like to have you all look at that for a second or two. All right, the names have been changed to protect the innocent. So if you all would just maybe 20, 30 seconds to scan this, and then I'd like to get your feedback on the board. You could either put it into the, the chat group, or like to hear it verbally.
It's for human consumption. The formatting is of the professional experience is not for the ATS. So this is definitely for human consumption.
Right.
But it's set up exactly the way that I write resumes. You got the headline at the top, your positioning statement, or I call it value proposition, and then keywords, and then professional experience. So, yeah.
Any other comments or thoughts?
Well, I'd say you lead with the job title instead of the company name. A lot of resumes I see have the company name first, and the job title seems almost secondary. And as long as that person wants to do a similar type of job, or it makes sense as a next step, then by leading with the job titles, it's sort of leading people to believe what that headline you have there is, that you're qualified because you have held those previous job titles that jump out at you.
It's pretty, in many respects, it's a pretty standard format for, an experienced professional. Any other thoughts or comments?
I noticed no LinkedIn contact information, and you do include sort of a geographical marker.
One of the things I do with resumes is I circle all the numbers in the beginning. When I look at it, seems like they could use a few more numbers to justify accomplishments or something, maybe.
Before I go back to the presentation, and we'll be coming back and forth to this resume, the point I want you all to keep in mind as we talk today is this person is a financial professional, an accountant, actually a CPA, that found her calling in business development as opposed to accounting. So what she's looking to do now is to transition into a business development role. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we're talking through the rest of the presentation. So the first thing I want to think about is branding. Your resume needs to be consistent with all of the other media that you're going to be using. People have talked about LinkedIn, and that is very important. Lynn, if you've got any thoughts on being consistent with your resume and LinkedIn, this would be a great place to add those.
When I deal with job seekers, I believe you've got to have 3 documents sort of aligned. You have your pretty resume, your deconstructed resume, if you're dealing with the applicant tracking system, and your LinkedIn profile. Now, LinkedIn is above and beyond the resume, but it really makes it easier as a job seeker and streamlines processes if you have the matchy-matchy between the resume and the LinkedIn profile to a certain extent, but you can only have one LinkedIn profile. And then you can customize, your resumes from your base resume to match the job description. But if you have to weave in some keywords, it's much easier to weave in the word strategically between words 6 and 7 in bullet point 2 on all these 3 documents than it is to try and reinvent the wheel. So I like alignment as a job seeker. Afterwards, you could do whatever you want to do.
Absolutely. And, as a recruiter, we use LinkedIn a lot nowadays to identify candidates. without even posting an ad, you can get to folks by just doing a search. And in the last couple of searches I've been doing, I've been using LinkedIn extensively. And the nice thing about LinkedIn is that, you can print somebody's profile and it comes up in the form of a resume. It would be really difficult for me to be looking at a LinkedIn resume and thinking I've got a great candidate or not, and then finding their actual resume is significantly different. So you want to make sure that there's consistency in your resume and your LinkedIn profile. Also, I'm a big believer in the use of a bio. And the reason is because people will read a bio because if it's done right, it tells a story. Whereas they'll just scan your resume. There's people that, have different opinions of bios, but I think a bio is very important, and I recommend all of my candidates to have one as well. So you want to be consistent in the formatting between your resume, LinkedIn, and a bio. And then again, with whatever social media that you're participating in with respect to your job search. So keep that at the top of your mind. Think in terms of a brand, and most of branding is about consistency. Now, white space is really important if you're going to be scanning a resume as a human being. I think we all know what it's like to read a legal document. Tiny print, very tightly spaced. I mean, just looking at the document is intimidating, and it's, oh my God, I don't want to wade through that. And that's why we hire attorneys. So if that's one extreme of lack of white space, more white space is, far better on a resume. I really recommend that you use the header and footer function. That helps with formatting, and also, gives you a little bit more white space. The other thing that I would recommend is that, you have 1-inch margins on each side of the resume. That forces you into a little bit more white space as well. And to use 14 to 16 point fonts for your headings. Make sure they're bolded. And then like to see a 12-point font for the body of the resume. Remember, if somebody's reading this, they're going to be reading it on a computer, and if they know anything about manipulating their computer, if they want to condense it down or zoom in or out on the resume, that's pretty easy to do. But for somebody that holding paper in their hands, you want to make it as easy as possible for them to scan your resume. When you get into the actual job functions, write in paragraphs, maybe a sentence or two tops, that outlines your responsibilities in that job. Also, in some cases, if the company isn't widely known, to tell a little bit about the company in terms of the size of the company, whatever products they sold, what industry they occupy. If it's AT&T or IBM or Google, that might not be as necessary as everybody knows it. But certainly, smaller companies would be really important. Separate your accomplishments from your responsibilities by using bullet points. And the old rule of thumb that I was trained in years ago is keep it to 7 bullets and 7 words per bullet. So the bullet isn't supposed to be a paragraph with a bullet next to it. It's supposed to be a key phrase, because one of the things that your resume should do is stimulate interest and questions. So you want to give them enough information to call you and start a conversation, but you might not want to give them so much information that it answers the question and they decide that you're not appropriate for whatever they're working on. And again, as we've discussed before, be a specialist, and especially specialized in terms of the job that you're applying for, that you're interested in. We saw the format of the resume I put on the screen, and there was a headline below the line that separated the name of the individual, her contact information. So the headline really needs to be a headline. If you open a newspaper and look at a headline, it is big and it's bold, a few words, often misleading to the point that they want you to read the article, stands out and you can't miss it. So your headline should be, in my opinion, 3 words. And the 3 words would be, you know, your level in the in your career, whether you're C-level, vice president, director, your job function. Are you accounting and finance? Are you marketing, human resources, project management? And then the third would be your industry specialty or focus. So are you in manufacturing? Are you franchising? Or are you high technology, something like that? Maybe your pharmaceuticals. 3 words, you know, that are big, bold. Those might be, you know, closer to a 20-point font, bolded or more. Somebody's going to read that and they're going to know immediately what to expect in the rest of the resume. Your highest level of achievement or the position you seek. Your functional discipline, again, that's, you know, whether you're marketing, finance, accounting, human resources, operations, something like that, and your industry focus. So here's some sample headlines that that I pulled off some recent resumes that I've been working with. So you see the first one is director, so they're director level, sales and marketing, and in education technology. Another good way to position your headline with respect to the level you're going after is senior level. It's a little bit more generic, and it gives you some flexibility depending on the size of the company. It would indicate that you're probably someplace between director level and C-level. So you see the last 2 bullets. One's a CFO for restaurant and hospitality. Of course, that's a chief financial officer. C-level financial officer, so that kills 2 points. CEO in manufacturing, same thing. Okay, then the next point is what I call a positioning statement. It could be your executive summary, although, you know, executive summary is more general and it is based on what you've done in your career. I like to coach people to make that positioning statement very specific as to what you're good at and what you're looking to do. What I recommend is basically 3 sentences for an executive summary or positioning statement. The first sentence is sort of a little recap of your headline that is written in, you know, paragraph form. And it answers 3 questions. Who are you? What do you do? And who do you do it for? Okay, so who are you? I'm a director level. What do you do? Sales and marketing executive. And who do you do it for? In a consumer packaged goods, for instance. What you're all about and whether or not you're going to fit into any searches that they have going on, either internally in their organization or if you're an executive recruiter and working on different you know, search assignments.
Well, my thought here is, what if in constructing all this, and this is fantastic, beyond fantastic information, but what if what you're aspiring to do and what I consider to be my sweet spot was 5 years back in my resume, and not necessarily what I do now?
Well, you know, the question is, what do you want to do now? And if you want to go back to what you were doing 5 years ago, then that's how I would structure your resume. You just have to convince the hiring manager that you haven't lost ground in those last 5 years with respect to what's going on in that particular field. Develop your positioning statement around what you want to do, especially if there's a job in question that you're applying for. Then create the positioning statement so that it parallels that job requirement. Did that answer your question, Richard?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So the second sentence gives a little bit more depth to your first sentence. And this really starts to get you into the point of positioning yourself as a specialist. So if you go back through your career, you can highlight a repeating pattern of things that you've done that you've been really good at. I can't think of anybody whose resume is so broad and diverse that there's no common theme. It's just not realistic. If your area of competence was like in mergers and acquisitions, or in startups, or turnarounds, or product development, or new business development, you want to craft your next sentence as saying to the effect that these are areas where I've got a lot of depth and strength in performing for my employers. So now you're giving more body to your positioning statement. It's not just what you do, who you do it for, and at what level. Now you're telling them specifically, I'm an expert at launching new products, or I'm an expert in new products and program management, or I'm an expert in turnarounds, for instance. And then the final sentence, a little bit more personal. It talks to, it starts getting into the strengths and attributes you have as an individual, leads you into those kinds of competencies. Let's go back and take a look at Jane Doe. Okay, can everybody see Jane Doe's resume now?
Yes.
Okay, going back to her resume, what I'm recommending is that starting off with her name and in the header section of the resume, she can make that a lot bigger, a much bigger font. I mean, she could dominate that first section and it would be perfectly fine. She's a CPA. She doesn't put that on her resume at that point. I would recommend that she does. I'd also recommend that she move her contact information up into the header section. It doesn't have to be as large a font. That font that she's got there is probably fine, but you want your contact information so that obviously people can contact you. They want to know your telephone number. They want to know an email address, and a LinkedIn profile address would probably be the third item that you'd want to put in that section. Then the next line or the next section that would appear right below the blue separation line is your headline. So if you see in her case, she's got 1, 2, 3, 4 different boxes. And remember, she said she wanted to pursue a business development role. And she's got business development in there. She's also got franchise management, P&L management, and business opportunity identification. Well, 2 of those items might be appropriate for a headline, but not the same 2. The P&L management and business opportunity identification, those would be far better if they were put into a skill set. And so in her case, she should have something like senior business development franchising. Those would be, my recommendation for her in this case. And again, a much, much larger font. Since she's not pursuing a franchise management role, get that out of the headline. Business opportunity identification, is a skill set, has no business being on the headline, same as P&L management. Now let's take a look at her positioning or her executive summary. Drives revenue growth and brand value by leveraging 15 years of business development and leadership experience. Strategically brings in new business and develops by directing marketing research, prospecting clients, and employing winning network strategies. Now, that sentence, if edited a little bit better, might be a really good second sentence for a positioning statement. But it's just really very poorly constructed. Then her last sentence is streamlines business operations, optimizes workflows, and nurtures high-performing teams. Now, again, that doesn't speak to any personal attributes or skills, and it doesn't speak to business development at all. It really speaks to operations management. So in this positioning statement is really confusing. Would anybody disagree with that? So instead of speaking to strengths and experience in business development, it's a hodgepodge of business development and operations management. So this really works against her. Now, this positioning statement is something that I think is probably one of the most important parts of the resume. So I really recommend that people put a lot of emphasis on getting this one right. It tells the reader exactly where you need to be positioned based on what your interests are and what your experience is and what your skill sets are. Let's get back to the presentation. Any questions before we move off of that? Anybody disagree?
Jim, I just have the question. If you read a resume and right at the very beginning, they have obvious typos like that, obviously it speaks poorly to the candidate. How much does that affect you, or just go, hey, everybody has mistakes? What's your reaction?
Anytime you find grammatical errors or typos or misspellings in a resume, it's a check mark against the candidate. It's another good reason to not only use the tools to ensure that your grammar is correct, like Grammarly, spell check, but it's also a good idea to let friends and relatives or neighbors read over your resume, because they're reading it more like a prospective hiring manager would read it and would catch a lot of issues that you might miss. All right, here's some other examples of positioning statements. Now, one thing you'll notice is there's a minimal use of superlative adjectives describing the individual. What was it? Dragnet? Do you all old enough to remember that television show? Officer Friday, just the facts, ma'am?
The facts, only the
Just
facts.
the facts, yeah. So, I let the facts speak for themselves. So you don't need to put in a lot of extraneous words that have a tendency to derail the message a little bit. Keep it as clean as possible, and just lay out the facts, and then your resume will support that. Even the third one, a proven senior executive, that proven probably could go. But in this case, the person I was working with really wanted to keep it in there. So, you always do what the client wants in the end. That's the same thing with the first positioning statement. Although it's not too bad, there's a lot more terminology in there than necessary. And similar with the second. If I was to force my candidate to take my thought on the positioning statement on that second bullet, I would just call it a senior level sales and marketing executive, and take off the training management experience, and maybe leave in franchising and technology. I wasn't totally pleased with that because there were too many words in there that confused his positioning a little bit. On the other hand, this guy happens to be an entrepreneur. It really does read more like an entrepreneurial kind of positioning statement. You want people to get the primary message,
Right.
and the primary message is what you're good at. And if you're good at it, the superlatives are just kind of unnecessary.
Mhm.
Hey, Jim, I would add that, going back to a comment I made earlier, if you have the numbers to prove it, I don't need you to use adjectives to describe it.
Right.
If you're a salesperson who has met or exceeded your sales objective for the last 10 years running, you don't have to tell me you're good.
Well, if you're a senior level salesperson, you must have been, pretty good to get to that point,
Yeah.
to your point, Richard. Okay, so here's some that missed the mark. The first one is just confusing because it was sort of all over the place. Then a visionary CISO, a chief information and security officer is all about optimizing cyber protection while innovation and business growth for global corporations. Well, that's what a CISO is all about. And then, getting further into it, cybersecurity strategist. Well, a C-level person is a strategic position. So once again, all he's doing is saying the same thing over again. The deep knowledge of regulatory compliance and auditing principles might be helpful. Trusted security advisor to C-suite and board. Again, well, hey, you don't get to the C-suite if you're not a trusted advisor. So that one I thought was just, a bunch of gobbledygook, frankly.
And you're right. That's pretty redundant. That's good catch.
Yeah. If somebody had read this like Richard would say, give me a break. And then start editing it immediately.
Yeah, my reaction would be, you really think a lot of yourself, and that's somewhat of a sarcastic response.
Yeah. No, if I were you, Richard, I was raise my rates to work on that one. The whole point of a positioning statement is to make the point in a very short and easy to understand way. Who you are, what you do, who you do it for, what areas do you have a lot of strength and experience, and what kind of personal skill set do you have that sort of supports you've done in your career. Okay.
Comment I would make, Jim, is the first and the third reference teams. The second person with all the puffery didn't mention teams. And I think anybody who writes a resume that doesn't acknowledge they had a team that helped them and sounds like I did it all myself is also a detraction.
Richard, a great point and another good segue into the next section, as always. The whole point of being a senior executive is leading teams. You're right. And leadership, coaching, mentoring, and all those skill sets that go around leadership are really important. And which brings me to the skill stack. All right. Now, in the resume we looked at earlier, Jane Doe, she listed a bunch of skills, but there was no header for that section. It wasn't very impactful. So, what I recommend is to make this an important section in your resume. You can call it your skill stack, you can call it your skill set, you can call it whatever you want. One of the things that I would say is that the skill stack that each of us has is becoming more important as you position yourself as a specialist. And if you've got, kind of an unusual or different skills, they might all come together perfectly for a certain job function or career function. And I like to reference Scott Adams, the author of the Dilbert comic that I think most of us are familiar with. His skill stack is pretty unique. He had a degree in economics and got into banking, went on, got his MBA from Berkeley. After a while, determined that, corporate America wasn't for him, and he needed to do something else. He liked the idea of getting into cartooning. And along the way, he practiced and, got some experience drawing. And he also became a licensed hypnotist. Now, people would ask, well, how does that all fit together? But as he explains it, the skills that you derive from being a hypnotist is all about influence. move somebody mentally in a certain direction? Well, so if you think about having a corporate career and all the craziness that goes on in corporations, having experience in banking, having experience in his case in AT&T, and then some experience, as a hypnotist, that would be ideal for the Dilbert comic strip. So a lot of times, we have skills that we really don't understand or appreciate how they can work together with other skills to really position you as a specialist and help create a great career niche for you. Now, here's some examples of skills that you might want to put in your skill stack. I mean, you have your own particular skills. You can shorten some of these, like customer relationship management. You could just make that CRM. Business and marketing research, just marketing research is all you need there. Project planning, design, maybe project management would be all you need. But these are some examples of things in your skill stack that would be of interest to people. And the neat thing about the skill stack is it sort of breaks up, the reader positioning statement to something that he can scan very easily, or she can scan very easily, that also supports your positioning and your job interest. What I also recommend is when you put this section together, put it together using, say if you're using Microsoft Word, use the table function so that it holds the formatting. You can center each one of the boxes, or you can justify them left or right, whatever makes sense. But that will really hold the formatting for you, and things won't get screwed up in transmission. And having said, talked about formatting, I always recommend that even if you prepare your resume in Microsoft Word, save it as a PDF file, PDF document, and always transmit your resume as a PDF. And the reason is because the formatting has a tendency to go awry in transmission. So moving into the experience section, now this is an example that is actually, other than the fact that there's too much spacing between the company name, the title of the person, the rest of the responsibilities and achievements, and that's just a formatting issue that could easily be changed. And Richard makes a good point. Some people like to see the position first. Some people like to see the employer first. Doesn't really make too much difference to me. But what I would say in this case is also use the table function to set up your, the name of the company, the title that you held, and the years that you were there. And the table function, it'll hold your formatting, and you can also go back and make it so that the grid lines of the table don't show up. And this is exactly what he did here. The problem is somehow he got the actual tables too large, so it prints too many lines and should be brought down. Then you'll see that he goes into a explanation of his job responsibilities. Again, a little bit of this is redundant. He led all aspects of franchise sales and marketing for Peterbrooke Chocolatier. Well, if you led all aspects of franchise sales and marketing, there's no reason to list them again, is there? What might have been helpful here, since a lot of people probably didn't know much about Peterbrooke Chocolatier, was to indicate the size of the business, how many years they'd been in business, for instance, sales volume, or something that would help people understand the employer if they weren't familiar with them before. And then finally, instead of using bullet points, you use check marks. Richard, here I think you'll see a lot more objective measurement in use. You wrote out 5 instead of using the numeral 5, built 5 internationally landed lauded websites. 100% improvement in engagement, reach, and share of voice, 100% improvement in lead flow, directly responsible for 3 million in new business.
He
Excuse me?
has numbers, but he's got lots of mistakes and awkwardness in what he wrote. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, Richard. You can only force him to do so much. But that, again, that's why I said that it's so important to, especially if you're working with a career coach or a resume writer, to run it by other people so that you can get their opinion on it as well. Any questions on this? I'm not going to go through all the rest of the resume, because this is the bulk of the resume is listing your the positions you held and the employers you worked for. What I will say is, I have one complete resume that is a history of your entire career that goes back to even your first job out of college. Because people, especially recruiters like me, I want to see your foundational training and development. I want to know how you got your start, and because you carry that training and development through your career. Certainly, if you're a CPA, I want to know, were you trained by one of the big 4 accounting firms? Because if you were, then I have a certain expectation of how you perform throughout your career. Likewise, if you worked for IBM back in the day, they were known, as well as a number of other companies, for really good training and development programs for new folks. So that first job is really important. If you're sending your resume to an employer, maybe they only need to see the last 10 years of your work history. But if you're working with an executive recruiter, they want to see the entire enchilada, and they're going to get it one way or another. I mean, that's their job to really understand the full picture of your career. So just make sure you've got a resume that is incredibly detailed, and then from that, you can make alternates that either fit the job better or that are more appropriate for sending directly to a job board. Or, for instance, maybe you want a one-page resume that you can hand out at a networking event. Okay, so we're coming to the point where we're sort of wrapping it up. Again, you want to make your resume, to make it easy for human scanning, make your headline, titles, and section headers bold. Make your headline just as large as you can without going into extra lines. You always want to position yourself as a specialist, so be thinking in terms of the flow of your resume supporting that. Your headline only needs to be 3 words: what level you're at in your career, what industry sector, and what functional discipline. Make an impactful positioning statement, and that all you need is 3 sentences to do that job. Catalog your skill stack. And even if these are skills that wouldn't normally relate to some kind of a career, they might be skills that really support your career. And use the table format to structure that section. Also use the table function to hold the format for the jobs, titles, and companies you work for. So that is my presentation for today. Any thoughts, questions, comments, or violent disagreements?
I have so much work to do to
Really helpful stuff.
my head's about to explode.
Well, Richard or I would be happy to help you if you need it. So don't be bashful about reaching out to us. Any other questions or thoughts, Richard?
Well, my comment that you made, and our previous illustrious leader from Great Careers made, is maybe you do have one resume that's really just a category of everything you could possibly put on your resume, including that early job experience and other things. And as you say, then you can pare that down or modify it for a particular use or purpose. I think that is a good idea to capture everything. And I'll just go back to what I said earlier. I'm a numbers guy. I don't care about if you think you're wonderful or you're fantastic. Show me the numbers that prove it, and I'll believe it. That's my final thought.
Absolutely, Officer Friday. Just the facts, ma'am. That's all that counts. Yeah, because the bottom line is everybody thinks they're special in some way, and it just becomes a distraction to the reader, and you don't want distractions. You want to, the bottom line is you want to be short and to the point, but comprehensive. So, Richard, you're absolutely right. You need at least one resume that has it could be 10 pages long. You might not want to give that to anybody, but at least that'll be the document that you would use as the source information for any resume that you would create that was more of a specialist. So yeah, and that's probably a message that young kids need to know starting out, right away, because they might not catalog everything they did that could be useful down the line in their careers.
I do have one or two other quick comments, Jim, which was probably 10 times more people will see your LinkedIn profile than ever see your resume. So your LinkedIn, while we've only talked about resumes, you need to spend more energy on in my opinion, your LinkedIn profile than you do your resume, because a lot of people will see it and, like you said, Jim, screen you out as a recruiter if you haven't done a good job on your LinkedIn profile.
Right. That's a good point. And again, LinkedIn has become maybe one of the most powerful tools that recruiters use, to find candidates. So, and I've been using it extensively in my search assignments. All right. Well, we're pretty much exhausted our time today, and I'm pleased that you all have stayed even over a little bit. So unless there's any other questions, we'll call it a day.
This is
You
really
will
helpful.
be-
Thank you.